Well, I think most notably the songs are very, very short. Even though there's 14 songs, they're all very, very short. So among the longest songs is you have
What's up, everybody? How you doing? Welcome back to the Punk Rock Review Podcast. Today, we are going to talk about two albums that came out in 1995. They're two records that are hitting 30 years this year, and they're kind of massive. We've got Green Day's follow-up to Dookie, Insomniac. We also have No Use for a Name, Leche Con Carne, and that album I think might actually require a little more conversation than the Green Day one. But we're going to start the day with a little bit of Green Day talk because it's a band that a lot of the youngsters still like, and I think it I don't know. People get mad when I talk about Green Day because they're like, they're not punk enough. Well, then don't watch the video. Like I don't understand that. I don't understand being like, ooh, topic I'm not interested in. Click. Like what? So by all means, complain if you want to. I don't care, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. Green Day's Insomniac came out in October of 1995 on the 10th. 14 songs at a far more brisk 32 minutes and 49 seconds than Dookie. Some of the notes that I wrote down, I put down that Dookie isn't a lot longer than this record. I don't know why I just jumped into this, dude.
Mm-hmm.
How are you doing, Rob? What's up, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. I mean, I'm as excited to talk about this stuff as you are.
Yeah, okay. Well, then we'll just jump right back into it, man. Like midway through the sentence, I was like, I didn't even ask him how he's doing today. What an asshole can I be? So, okay, Dookie is not a lot longer than this album. They're both 14 songs. Dookie's about 40 minutes. This one's 33, just under 33. But Dookie does include about 2 or 3 minutes of dead air with that song, the hidden track, All By Myself. But my point is that this album, it feels like it moves along a lot quicker. It's 25% shorter or something is what it feels like. It's not. It's only a few minutes shorter, but it feels like the flow of this album is just incredibly more, I don't know the word, man. It's just, it was built well.
Well, I think most notably the songs are very, very short. Even though there's 14 songs, they're all very, very short. So among the longest songs is you have Brain Stew at 3 minutes, which isn't a song that really drags, you know what I mean? And then you have Panic Song, which is like the epic song on this. It like is the song to be long on this. And then everything else, it's it's punk rock length. It's barely over 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So the songs kind of come and go really really quickly. So that's why it feels like it's so much quicker to get through, I think, than Dookie. I think the spacing of this album's kind of weird too, because I feel like it's got little different sections to it that actually help it flow. I don't think it's as much of a ride of like different types of things here or there. I feel like different parts of this album actually kind of sound similar to itself
Okay.
As it goes along. But it's just I think what you're hitting on is it's just those small chunks that are there with a lot of 14 song album that still only clocks in at 32 minutes. And there's nothing really indulgent here, right? Other than maybe you can say Panic Song that has like the long where they're really sort of showing off. There's nothing like that here. There's nothing to show that like I'm the best at doing solos or I'm the best at doing that, other than some of the dynamics in Panic Song. Everything else is just is going. And part of the idea with this album is they wanted it to be faster. Specifically, they wanted it to be darker. They wanted it to not have the shine that Dookie had. And I think part of it is still keeping the punk rock shorter songs, and they wanted it not to be their rock record. And I think part of it was having the short songs.
That's funny because not wanting to have the sheen of Dookie, I listened to Dookie as well, just to kind of, because I was talking about this album, and when you talk about Insomniac, you're gonna talk about Dookie.
Yeah, it's really relevant.
And so I went back and forth with them and listened to them, and it really is a far glossier record with production. But the songs, like the actual structure of the songs, the riffs, the even like the lyrical content, it is darker than their first major label record. They had 2 before that, but I think they only had 2 before that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think this is their 4th album total and their 2nd on a major. So but there's a grittiness to this group of songs that I don't personally find on the previous record, and I think that's important. note, because I mean they've talked about it. That's something they went in there with intent, you know.
Yeah, and it's a few things. Like we're talking about this. We just talked about Dookie a lot last year because
Right.
these albums came out in back-to-back years, which is kind of mind-blowing thinking as big as Dookie was. Like the Dookie cycle didn't end. And
Right.
then like they went away and then they came back with Insomniac. Like they were still just going on Dookie and then this came up. So that's part of everything that there's two narratives that the band always puts out. One, it's that the reason why the songs are shorter, the lyrics are darker and all that is because they kind of had to be a little more old school with it and write it on the bus. Like they toured a lot on
Right.
Dookie kind of had like 3 tours on it where it's like the regular punk tour they were doing, the festival scene, and then the additional stuff after that kept getting kind of stacked on. So they kind of wrote it in the back of the bus, even though the songs are pretty well like produced. I think in their final form, their original like what they were made were not the same songs that they had for Dookie. And then it was a reaction to Dookie. Like they were never going to make a heavy album, but they wanted to make like their fastest songs are on this. Again, their whole career, their fastest songs are on this album. They didn't like necessarily being painted as the bubblegum sugary band that they were, because they're really not. Like even they sound upbeat, but their lyrics have always had that dark kind of tinge to them, and they wanted this one to be like the darkest. And if you look at their whole career of their non-political albums, I think like Politics can always have real dark tones to it because that's just the nature of politics.
Right.
Of their personal stuff, which is most of what their career is, it's never as dark as this album is. Like there's not a lot of sunshine on this album whatsoever, which is really odd for a pop punk album and a band like Green Day that always has that. And a lot of the Gilman Street bands always have that kind of positive sort of tone to them. And this goes in kind of the other direction.
I barely consider them a pop punk band, so I totally understand that. I think that their lyrical content has never been glossy and super. It like you said, they have pop sensibility to their music, but I would say that they're more along the lines of like rock and punk rock versus pop punk. They just got really fucking popular. It's like, you know, they're pop punk for the sake of like they have major label money behind them and they've got some catchy hooks, but like their actual guitar riffs, what they're playing, their the subject matter of the songs and records, none of that stuff is like Blink or Mest or Newfound Glory or Fallout Boy or any of these bands that people do consider pop punk. Look, it's a gray area. I don't really care. I'm not planting my flag and going, I don't give a shit. Green Day has never been like a punk rock band to me either. They fall in this weird, like I said, gray area where they fit in a bunch of different categories. If you called them a punk band, I really wouldn't argue too much. If you called them a pop punk band, wouldn't argue too much. If you called them a rock and roll band, to my understanding, that's what they call themselves, a rock and roll band. So, but yeah, I do think that they got a little bit tired of being referred to as these, you know, because they're not like Blink at all. Like their personality's not the same, and nothing about them is like Blink-182 outside their success.
Well, and then like what they really hated is like they were referred to as these overnight sensations, which like yeah, to some extent they were, but like no, it was their third album. That, you know, Dookie was their third album. This was their fourth album. They had you know, they had toured with Bad Religion as a support act for a whole thing. Like they had been around, you know what I mean? It's not like they just were formed one night and it just blew up. So they took exception to like and I would say Billy specifically, he took exception to the slights. Like I think a lot of the guys from our scene, like when they kind of make it or they get the flack or whatever, they're just sort of like the blinders on and they're going ahead because they're doing what they want to do, or they like overreact to it and make fools out of themselves. Well, Billy kind of had the thing where like he was kind of hurt with a lot of the criticisms that were leveled at the back. Like he really loved like the Gilman scene and all that. Like that was where he grew up. Like he was a kid of that. He was a product of that. And the way they were thought of and the way they were shunned. And again, compared to those other kind of bands, I think a notion of that too, that we have to remember is a lot of those other bands, the pop music they bring into punk is like mainstream pop music is what they bring in. Whereas with Green Day, the pop music they bring into punk is classic rock. It's rock music. Like we always say, they borrow more from stuff that's like on rock radio or from Queen and all that.
I was gonna mention that.
Yeah. And even every album they've had, and there's a song or two on this one where you feel that sort of influence. But a lot of bands, it's their cop out to it's a marketing thing to say they're not punk and they're rock. But like Green Day can actually kind of claim that, like, they could be rock punk if that was a kind of a term. So I really think they wanted to differentiate themselves. At the same time, they're still Green Day, so it's not like when Rancid had the same conundrum in 2000, they made a really heavy record, with Rancid 2000. What's funny about Green Day is like this is them being like angry and pissed off and vengeful, and it's still pretty darn catchy. It was still huge. This is their big, like, the album that quote unquote flopped after Dookie, and it still sold more than like anyone else can ever dream. It's just that one album they had was so
Wait,
big.
Insomniac was considered a flop?
Yeah, well, look at it like on the chart next to what Dookie sold and then what Insomniac sold. Now, in the end, it sold 7 million. But at at the time, it was like this band had come out. They had this new record with all these aggressive songs, and yes, it was still doing very well, but it was no longer the hot thing. When
I remember it being very, very popular, but it wasn't
but,
as popular as Dookie. Like,
but that's
I'm
what.
not,
And a lot of bands have that, and they usually die after those things. You know what I mean? Where they have that one
right.
album and they can never do it again. That relative to anything, and people always point this out. Like, people like to say that it's Dookie and it's American Idiot, and then there's the fall in between. Yes, there's a fall in between, but that fall is only in comparison to those like two of the biggest records like in rock history,
Right.
versus these big time ones. But Insomniac does have a weird place because it has the fewest amount of singles I think they ever released on one of their albums post Dookie.
I think that's one of the things I like about it, man, is it didn't get as much radio play, so I didn't get burnt out on the whole album.
They didn't market it in the same kind of way because they were touring off of Dookie. So like the lead video to Geek Stink Breath is like some dude's like dental surgery. That's like disgusting. And MTV actually kicked it back and said that like, because it wasn't getting like a ton of demand, they weren't going to play it. They asked if they had, something. And again, this is the time when they're still playing the Green Day Dookie videos, and those are still doing really well. So it's not like,
well,
it's
the
not
only
like
reason
the public had soured on them. You know what I mean? It's just a piece of their catalog that wasn't as like received in the same kind of way.
Yeah, you can't really repeat the success of Dookie, though. I think it's kind of a just a fool's errand to try to go out there and be like, we're going to do that again. Like, no, you're not. Go out there. Then I think that they approached it the right way. They just put out the best record they could, a little bit more angry. But I mean, trying to repeat that. But the whole reason so these albums came out a year apart, right? Not really. They came out almost 2 years apart because Dookie was the very beginning of 94, and this came out in like the fall of 95. So they're like February 18, 19 months. Yeah, they're like 18 months apart or so. And it's like that's because of all the touring of Dookie. I'm not saying that they like intentionally did that. They just didn't have time to get back there and record, from my understanding. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've grown to appreciate Dookie a lot over the past year, maybe year and a half. But I've always liked this record a bit more. I think maybe I was just more burnt out on the songs of Dookie getting played to death. I remember when this one came out, I absolutely loved it, and I didn't really jam Dookie like that when it came out. Like, I was immediately tired of it. And I was always look, to be very clear, 94 is when Offspring and Green Day came out. I gravitated more towards Offspring immediately. I don't know why. I had both albums. I just liked the Offspring stuff better back then. I didn't like, you know what I didn't like? I didn't like the fact that the Green Day stuff, they did have a lot of like the Beatles sound in their music. And I fucking hate the Beatles, and I still don't like them to this day. I like Green Day, but I don't like the Beatles. And back then I was way more what's the word, man? I was just narrow-minded with my musical choices. Like, I'm not going to act like I wasn't. I was just I like one kind of sound, and that was about it. And I wasn't my palate hadn't matured at all, and I wasn't ready to listen to like even like reggae music. I didn't like that, but I liked fast ska stuff. I wanted fast music. As I get older, I even like slowed down punk. I like slowed down ska, which is reggae, and I like not really. I'm not, but I'm just saying, like, I like a lot more down tempo stuff, more chill stuff. Lyrics has always been important to me, and vocal preferences have changed. But yeah, this album is really good, man.
And I should say, I talked about like the singles. With that said, like for me, this album was key for me really getting familiar with Green Day, because speaking of the singles, the one that was paired for me that I got on rock radio out here was the Brain Stew Jaded combo that I think a lot of people got on rock radio throughout the country, which for me, I would have found Green Day in like 97, 98. So this Nimrod and Dookie, it all kind of blends together, as basically the same band. But that was by far of their early songs. My favorite was Brain Stew. I still think it's the best use of like Crazy Train, Last Resort, pop that real simple riff. It's the best use that anyone ever does. And it's like when you hear that song live or even play it on the guitar, mess around with it, like it's only a few notes, but it's still kind of really badass. And the way that Billy lets it ring out and all that, it's just like a really cool song that has nothing really going on in it. That's just something that like you could do in the basement. Like you said, that's a perfect song for the back of the bus, right? That he would just have strumming things kind of singing along.
While I do appreciate the simplicity of that song and the ability for young kids to pick up a guitar and play it, I think it's necessary. I hate that song. Hate's a strong word. It's the only song on the album that I go, oh man, I've heard this a lot. Like it's laborious to get through a little bit. I still like the song. I get like way too polar with my words. I hate something when I don't really hate it. So I don't actually hate the song. I don't really love it, but I don't hate it. It is a very middle of the road song for me. But Jaded is like one of the best tracks on the whole record for me. But if you listen to it, you're gonna go, "Oh no, shit!" Like
it's great when you hear Jaded out of context too. Out of context meaning out of context from Brains too, because like your brain just goes, for your brain's too Jaded as if it's one song. And I think Jaded is like I think Jaded is they consider that their fastest song in terms of like a punk rock song that's just not like one bit like, like, and I don't know if that's exactly true, but at the time when they recorded it, they felt that it's fun because there's not a lot of that kind of fun on this album. And that's a piece of it. That's a piece of it. This song, this album to me is more heartfelt, almost you could say it's dark, but it's more, as they say, they call it, it's their rawest record where they were kind of saying, what they meant off the top of their head. It's one where I think for better, they didn't think too hard about some of these songs lyrically.
That's for better on this.
I appreciate it. Yeah, you do appreciate it. I think going forward, when they went forward with Nimrod was back to that Beatles sensibility.
We're gonna talk about that in a minute too.
Like you're talking about, and so that more comes with that sort of overall impression of Green Day. So this one kind of gets tucked in. It's like the dirty little heavy album in between all the normal Green Day, but it's as iconic as all of them. I think the artwork is as good as any of the artwork for any of the Green Day albums. It's as cool. That was also part of the intent, like with the imagery they had in there, because Dookie would look like a cartoon and a comic. So they wanted this to look, it was very, very, very intentional. And they were a very pissed off band. Like they talk about, as far as headspace, when they made this, like they had made it, but they had not really felt like the fruits of that labor quite yet. They were still just getting crap from people and that kind of stuff. Right. So it really hadn't settled in. Like I said, they were on tour for so long that they weren't even home for a while after Dookie really had popped to really even know like how much their lives had improved or anything like that, because they were going so far on.
Can you imagine that? Imagine dropping an album and then you leave your like 3-bedroom house that you're stressing to pay your rent on, and you get home and you literally can afford like a 12-bedroom house with 5 bathrooms and a 4-car garage and the cars to put in there, like, and that's not even an issue. And like, I just can't even imagine that. Like,
it has to mess with the head of like anyone who goes through, whether you're an athlete or you're in business and you do that. But like, especially if you're these guys where that's just not in the, like, it's not even like if you're going to be a pro athlete, whenever you're going to the NFL, you at least are anticipating getting rich at that point. Right. These guys, when you look at the arenas they were booked out of that first tour, Dookie was supposed to be a regular album. You know what I mean? They are booked into punk venues, and famously they were like overrun, and those venues had a really difficult time. And that's part of what added to, like, there's the all the riots that happened when Green Day was touring off of Dookie. When it comes down to it, there's about 3 of them that it's noted for, like, these really big issues that happened. And it's just because like this band was booked for places that it was too big for. So you have like a radio station event that was like a free event that turned into like a big old thing in Boston. It's because like, you have this little, a normal punk band that some college kids are going to go to. No, you offer a free concert with Green Day in 1994 and it turns into a literal, riot. Right. That kind of stuff was happening just sort of all the time with them. So they were a bit worn out. They took a break before Nimrod, and then they took a lot of breaks in and out until American Idiot, where they kind of like refocused and reformed as a band and set that like legacy track that they're on now.
Well, American Idiot was like the rebirth of the band, like in general. It was like they came back out and had Dookie all over. It was weird.
And except they were refocused though too. Like in like to their careers in the same kind of way. It's almost like the
Yeah.
way they almost relaunched their careers. I feel like in some ways with that
That's kind of
album.
what I meant. It's like they started over almost, and it's like, yeah, I don't know. Speaking about this album though, man,
Mhm,
Geek Stink Breath, it's got one of my favorite like guitar riffs and like vocal melodies. It's really catchy. It's very sing along worthy. I really like Bob Zavula Who,
mhm,
Jaded, Stuart and the Ave. Those songs are really good. No Pride. That song reminds me of Dookie a lot, man. I was
mhm.
listening to it and I was like, this one might have been written before they got to these other songs. Like this might be an older one. And it might be something they wrote. Who knows, man? Who knows? 5 years ago, who knows? But while listening to this album today, to refresh myself with it, I realized something. The
What's that?
first minute of Panic Song is a bass line that just sounds like anxiety. I've listened to this album so many times and I've never realized that. It's like this more, it gets more and more frantic. It's just like, I don't know. I never put that together with the name of the song being Panic, that's what they were doing, was trying to get you to have this anxiety ridden. Then they start going into the vocals, and it's just interesting to, after 30 years, still be learning something about a record that I actually owned and enjoyed my whole life.
Yeah, and Mike has talked about that at the time that was as fast. He says now he can play that song kind of and play at those tempos just because he's learned to do it. But at the time, their goal was just like how fast can I get? It was that sort of show of like how
Oh,
can
that's
we do
cool.
that to create that sort of thing. And then Trey was matching him on the drums as they went through it. And then so it's almost like two songs, and then it goes into the lyrical part, which sort of it explains it all. I love
And it
that.
changes it quite a bit when the vocals come in.
I love that section on this album. Like I was saying, I think if he goes from basically Armitage to No Pride, I feel like those could have been
Let
Dookie
me see
tracks.
here.
The start of the album, I feel like is and for some of the negative reviews that this album had, like when it first came out as being like just a Dookie ripoff, which I don't think it is. I think if you thought that, it would be from those first couple of songs. I think those ones are
That's
most similar
interesting
to Dookie style.
because I think when I hear Armitage Shanks, it sounds nothing like Dookie to me. And then maybe it's the production. It might be the production more so than the songwriting. But when I hear that, I don't think Dookie at all. I mean, it sounds like a whole different band. It probably is the production because now that I'm thinking about it, the music itself sounds a little bit like some of the stuff off Dookie.
I will say though, for me, this album really just hits into like another stratosphere once you hit 86, which is to me like one of maybe their most not their most underrated song, but like their best of the non big Green Day songs. It's right up
Oh
there.
man, I like Stewart and the Ave, dude. Stewart
And
and the Ave has
that was
it's got
that was pretty cool.
amazing
I mean,
vocal melodies, dude.
I,
It was a deep cut that I liked in high school, bro. That song is awesome.
so if you go, you get 86, which I love, which again, it's about Gilman Street, it's about all that good stuff. You got the Panic
Right.
song, which we just talked about, taking you into Stewart Avenue, which brings you kind of back down, at least like from the pace of it. And then that Brain Stew Jaded thing. And then you're going towards the end, which I've always loved. Westbound Sign and Taiwan Hill are fine, but Walking Contradiction is another one of those kind of underrated songs that I say underrated because everyone likes it, but one of the non top tier songs
So
that I could appreciate.
this is what I wrote at the end of listening to the record. Like right at the end when it closed, I wrote a little blurb. I'm going to read it in its entirety real quick.
Mhm.
I put Walking Contradiction is a fantastic closer for an album like this. It leaves us on an upbeat high note, wanting more, possibly getting you to start the album over. Before streaming, that didn't matter at all, or if it did, it was way less, of course. But it's a great closer in my opinion. And I put the band plays very well in this record. The album is peak Green Day, so the highs of Dookie are a little higher, I think. Like there are a few songs that are outright perfection on that record, but there are a few songs that I either skip or outright don't like. Whereas on Insomniac, there are no skips for me at all. It is solid all the way through. For that reason, I rate this album better. And it's not like the singles or peaks of this album are really that far off from the ones on Dookie. They're really not. I'd say that they're not quite as iconic, but the rest of the album is also better than the other stuff on the album outside of the singles and whatnot. So I guess it depends on if you'd rather have like higher highs and lower lows or more of an even quality throughout the album. But obviously, I prefer the latter. And I put in all capital letters, Insomniac is Green Day's best album. And I stand behind that. I think that Insomniac is, in fact, Green Day's best record.
No, and I think that's I would have it
Super
further
subjective.
further down on the list, but it's with the Green Day albums, there's like there's like the good ones, and then there's like the all right ones. You know what I mean? The ones that are like that count as the super important,
There's
like
a few bands
awesome.
like that.
And this one, it's right in there. It's for me, it's one of those that if like I can picture having this, and I remember my cousin gave me this album. Just he gave me a bunch of albums because I like rock or whatever. He did like
Right.
the rock albums, and it's like there's no way you got this in the '90s if you had Smash, if you had some of these other albums and thought it sucked. You know what I mean? Like, there's just no way. Maybe if you were like a Dookie fan and that was the style and you got it and you thought like, oh, this band isn't very fun. But if you were into that sort of like just that hard rock alternative that this was sort of appealing to, like there's no way that this album like was could it be anything other than like a cool album, I think, to the people in that time frame.
Well, in 2027, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but Nimrod is really the album where people fell off. People really, it was a whole new generation of fans that it was just like, honestly, it's kind of like that Rancid 5 argument where I don't really like that record much, but I was around when Now Come the Wolves came out, and I like Let's Go, Out Come the Wolves, Life Won't Wait. So when that record came out, I was expecting a particular sound. But the kids that were like 16 when that album came out, that's like their favorite Rancid album.
Mhm.
Same thing with Green Day. When they like the high school kids that were in ninth grade hit Nimrod was their first introduction to Green Day, they love that record. But if you're like 23 at that point and you're used to listening to, what the Kerplunk and 1039, and then you get Dookie, and then you get Insomniac, and then you get Nimrod, and their big single is this like acoustic ballad. You're like, what the fuck? I remember people being pissed. And that song was huge, dude. It was everywhere for years, dude. I couldn't get away from that damn song. And I liked the song, and I still couldn't get away from it. I'm like running, stop singing the fucking song, Billy, stop. Damn. And it did a little fake stop. I'm like, oh my goodness, bro. Great song, man. Great song. Like as I get older, I really do appreciate it. But Nimrod's the one where I think people started to really fall off the Green Day wagon.
Yeah, I think
My experience.
I think we'll talk about this as the years go on and we keep telling the anniversary. I think their story, and I made a video about it years ago for this reason, and it did fairly well. It was like the time kind of after, I guess after this period, because this Insomniac's still kind of connected to Dookie, like it's so close in
I
proximity.
agree.
Right after, like it's like after this, then they're rock stars. Then what happens?
It's like they
between
matured
then?
a little bit too. Like this album's a little more mature than Dookie. Like
Mhm.
it's even called something a little more mature. Like you got Dookie and cartoon cover, and then you've got Insomniac with a more artfully done cover. If that makes any sense, it just feels like they were growing up as humans.
Yeah, and again, they were you were talking about like those first batches of songs. They were super young when when they wrote like a lot of them, but eventually,
Oh yeah.
um, yeah, the music's gonna sound a little different. I have to say something. I've been thinking about it. So last year I said that I think there's an argument that Billy Joe might be like the greatest like frontman like in rock history. Like when you take them all together, I actually think I have another hot take.
1 second, I apologize. I gotta let my dog out of the room.
Go ahead.
All right, big guy. Go, 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 go. Oh. At least I won't have to cut that out. It took me 2 seconds. So, anyways, okay. So, okay, yeah, dude, that was a bold statement you just made. Billy Joe's the greatest frontman of rock. I mean, have you seen Tim Armstrong play guitar live?
Yeah, but I'm comparing him
Nobody
more
has.
to like the like
Um,
iconic rock singers.
Oh no, it was a joke about how bad Tim is live. I was kidding.
Right. No,
Yeah,
I thought
no,
his guitar playing, obviously, yeah.
oh man, I love it, but it's like I've seen him play really well, but I've seen him play really
And
bad. So,
and he
anyways, go
can
ahead,
play.
continue your thought.
That's what no, but my half serious thought that I've really been trying to mull on is like, is Green Day, and in terms of like grand scale and all these things, does Green Day have a legit look at being the greatest like rock band that's ever existed? Like what I'm talking about, like in terms of like competing with like the Beatles and the Stones and those kind of bands, like they have the longevity of like any of those bands. They have like a catalog of
Well,
major.
sort of. They don't yet because they haven't been around as long.
Well, yeah,
But
maybe like
they're
not
still
next to like the Stones, but I mean, like you do have about a 4-decade run of like top albums in all of those decades. You have all these massive tours, all these sales record, all of this. So I'm wondering, like, can they compete? Like, are they legit? I know you would think about, yeah, they're one of the big selling bands, but
so
like, can we make a legit argument for them being like the biggest rock or the greatest? I guess you would say, not biggest or however you would define it, like rock band ever.
This is gonna be a rare thing, man. But
Hmm.
I'm gonna agree with you.
Oh shit!
I know, right? I think
On a
people
hot
are gonna
take,
be like, "What the?"
that's not
So
planned. Yeah.
okay, so and here's my response to that.
Hmm.
I'd say nobody can really say that you're wrong because I bet they outsold a lot of those bands. So if you're gonna go
Right.
with like, oh, they didn't sell as much, they probably did. But they just put out another album that, in my opinion, while I don't like the album as much, it is monumentally important to an entirely different generation of people.
Hmm.
Again, they did that shit in the 90s, the 2000s, and now the 2020s, and you're telling me that this band's not more relevant or as important as the Beatles, the Stones, Aerosmith, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix? Like, what are we talking about here? Are they the best guitar players? I don't know, not really, but that's not what we're talking about. Now, I don't think that they could exist without the Beatles, but I don't think Rancid could exist without the Clash, and I find them far more important
Hmm.
than like the Clash to a certain group of people. So it just depends on who you are, where you came from. I'd say people that are older than us would probably disagree. People that younger than us might agree wholeheartedly, though. And I think people our age would be a pretty mixed bag. But I really can't argue with that. I think that there is a argument there for them being the what's the word we're going to use? Are we going to use biggest, best, or most important? Because those are all three very different things.
Yeah, I don't know if like is biggest. I think big or like
Okay,
greatest.
I would say that they're in the runnings for the biggest.
Yeah,
I would say that they're
or
also.
grandest. I don't know. I don't know how like.
I
Yeah, I
would
guess
say
that's
that
so
as
big.
far as best and most important, it's like a two-pronged question. I think that like most important would probably be the Beatles,
Hmm.
but the best still may be Green Day because they've
Yeah.
got like song for song that they're competing. I don't know. It's very subjective. Old heads gonna get real pissed off. Like music snob types might get real pissed off, but whatever, man. It's 40 something years and they're still at the top. Like, what are we talking about? Rolling Stones, they still tour, they still do stuff, but they're not putting out new music that is that important
Mhm.
40 years later. I just don't think they are.
Right.
Neither the Beatles or any member of the band.
And when bands have
Yeah,
done
that's
that,
crazy.
when bands like say Aerosmith, like when they had a big hit in 2002, like that was sort of the narrative like around them. And you look at like the scale, and like that's basically where Green Day would be. Green Day's even sort of
Right.
surpassed that. So again, I think it's almost going to be for the next generation to answer, because it's going to be hard, because for us, or for like the old heads, it'll just be hard. Like I remember people getting mad when Green Day got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, as if they don't deserve to be there. It's like, what? Just because other bands have been snubbed does not mean that they are not like
Right.
this super. So I think like once people who like make music history aren't thinking of Green Day as three punks from San Francisco, and just thinking of them the way we can think of stuff without the context of it probably won't be that crazy of a question. So that's why it's a thought that's been swirling around it's I've been thinking about that for like over a year, ever since I saw Green Day, and just kind of sort of absorbed how big they were, even in comparison to like their peers. Like it
Yeah.
just made me sort of think like, shoot, how big is Green Day, like really, like on that biggest scale? Because there's just nothing in punk rock we ever quite think of that's that big.
Well, I don't consider them have to be a part of punk rock outside the fact that they still like a punk rock, like they still enjoy it and they're still friends with those people. They're like they're stadium rock at this point, but like
Mm.
but they still take bands like Rancid on the road and give them what I would imagine is a fairly nice paycheck. And it's like that they don't have to do that. That's really nice, man. I think that's cool of them to do. But I had the same experience when I was at that same exact tour that you went to. I literally thought like, holy shit, I didn't realize that this is what we were going. I just didn't realize that they were this kind of. They played at like what the Dodger Stadium or some shit like that's
Oh yeah.
crazy, dude.
And,
Like
and
they
like you know it, but like when you're really like absorbing it, it's like because you these sort of bands that are huge, you almost take them for granted, because they like, and
right.
they've been so big, they've been big for so long. But when you think about it, even compared to like bands that I again like that you would see sort of on par with them, like they just sort of dwarf them.
I
It's
would
interesting.
okay. This is how we can word it. My
Okay.
apologies.
Oh yeah, go for it.
We can say that they like objectively belong in the same conversation with the Beatles, Queen, the Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix, etc., etc., etc. They go in that conversation. If you're going to talk about who's the greatest rock band, is it? And you list off 5 bands, in my personal opinion, there is no time where that should not include Green Day.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I
I
and I'm
think.
not their biggest fan, and there's plenty of stuff that they do and that I don't care for. But we're speaking about something that I think I have to take my opinion out of it and just go, okay, objectively from this point of view, like what am I looking at here and going, kind of hard to argue. It's like talking
Mm.
about a Scorsese flick. I don't necessarily care for them all the time, but they're objectively well made. I mean, you know, he's a
I,
great director. What do I mean?
I'm glad you got my drift on where I was going with that. Like I wasn't trying to be as ridiculous as it sort of sounded when I
Well,
started out.
at first when you said it, I was like, "You're retarded," and then I started thinking about it, and I was like, "Well, I don't know, man. Maybe you'd be retarded to argue against it because I mean, there's so many metrics you can pull up to go. Well, then okay, what about this?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if they're
and
not
everyone
that
could do
great, then
that
how
too.
come they sold like the Beatles sold? If they're not that great, how come their tours are so important? If they're not that great, then how come they have another really monumentally important album 4 decades into their career? Like how is that not important and great and big and good? And I don't get it. And so, and then also seeing them live, I also got to understand how good they are as musicians, like what their talent level is. And I think it is far, far better than they get credit for, especially from like stubborn old punk rock guys.
Mhm.
So, man, Insomniac, dude, great album, man. Happy
Yeah,
birthday to it. Turning, what was it? Turning 30 years, 30 this year? Yeah, that's
30.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
Man, it makes me feel super, super old. Okay, man. Let's move on to the next album. This one you're gonna probably actually have the most to say about it.
Mhm.
Uh, let's see. How do you feel about the albums that I picked out for next week?
So we have Pump Up
No
and what was
Effects, Punk Up the Volume, and then MXPX, the what is it? The
Ever Passing Moment.
Ever Passing Moment, not Ever
Mhm.
Expanding, Ever Passing Moment. I actually kind of want to cover the MXPX one because it's like two sides of the same coin. I get like both of the same kind of sound. I get an album that I know I already love. I just want to get to talk about it, and then one that I've really never listened to much. So as long as you're cool with those two records, I'll
Yeah,
say
yeah, I'll have to listen to Ever Passing Moment a few more times just because like I know the song, but I just haven't
That's
listened to it
kind
in
of
a
the
long
cool part
time.
is it's not one of their bigger records. Dude,
Yeah, whereas
the Buffalo record, Life in General, their newest record is phenomenal.
yeah.
I think that this record needs a little bit of love though. It's turning 25. I think that's an important
See,
birthday.
now I'm feeling it. Now I'm remembering the albums that came out and they're celebrating these big
Man,
anniversaries. That's bothering me.
yes, dude. All right, so oh man, I don't know why I didn't pull this up. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
So we're gonna talk about No Use for a Name. And this is one of your favorite bands, correct?
It is.
So, okay, let's see. I just want to have this stuff in front of me. All right, here we go. Oh, it's got the like upside down. What's the upside down exclamation point thing, dude? What is it? What is that? Why is that? What does that mean?
Uh, I feel like I should know that.
Somebody in the comments, let me know what the upside down exclamation point means when I see it like written on stuff. I've seen it before. I just don't know shit what it means. Give me 1 second. I hit the wrong button on my thing. There we go. Okay. Boom. Okay. Doggone. Leche Con Carne. No Use for a Name. Leche Con Carne. It's their third record. It came out in '95. What is it? Like February? Yeah, too. So like
Mhm.
it's literally about to hit its anniversary date in about 3 weeks. So we got the first quarter of 1995. No Use for a Name drops Leche Con Carne in our laps, and we get one of the most important songs of their career, at least, Justified Black Eye. I'm gonna just stop right here, and I'm gonna let you kind of take over, man. Tell me a little bit about Leche Con Carne, what it means to you, what it means to the general, because this is a Fat Records release. It's a big one, so
Mhm. Yeah, and it's really for some people, they consider it like the first No Use for a Name album, even though that is not exactly true. It's their third album, but it kind of is the first one that sounds like that fully sounds like the sound that they would kind of be known for.
okay,
Um, and so that's why it is and of that run. So it's their first LP released on Fat. So I guess that's a way to think of it as well
okay.
because
Your
the
first one
other
on Fat Records.
yeah. Yeah, so that's another reason why it's thought of as that's in terms of those sort of debut thing, but it's like all the albums they did from there till Tony's death are kind of considered their classic albums. Now, this album wasn't quite with their classic lineup just yet. It's one album off. It's the next album where people really feel like it is the classic album, but it's pretty close. Now, some background really quick on No Use for a Name. Throughout the 1980s, to the extent that No Use for a Name existed, they were basically like a crossover thrash band. So they didn't really sound anything like what they sound like now. But so
Weren't they more like RKL?
yeah, but even even less so in that like goofy that goofy kind of sense than they were. But just like everyone else, once Suffer came out, their sound kind of changed. Everyone in that area kind of changed. But they're among the bands that came on the Fat Record side of things that were sort of all like recovering thrash metal bands that started doing punk rock. So NoFX is the one band that doesn't really have that. NoFX just always had metal guitarists. NoFX more modeled their sound off of RKL and off of Propaganda, whereas these bands again they had that
Well,
sort
hold
of
on. NoFX is like notorious for even telling people that they modeled their sound off of after RKL, Bad Religion, equal parts of each. You get NoFX. I mean, they say
Mhm.
that. So I mean,
Yeah.
Propaganda. I'd say this more like
Ask Fat Mike about Propaganda and how much he would define that as how that
yeah.
yeah.
I've never
And
heard him say that, but I've heard him say
and
it
not to
about
say
Bad Religion.
and obviously Suffer was huge for him
Oh yeah, I mean that changed a lot of bands.
as well. And yeah, and it did. It's kind of similar to the conversation we had earlier of what Dookie did for like the mainstream. Suffer kind of did before that, I think, for the underground. And so I say all that to say, if you listen to the No Use for a Name stuff that came out before the stuff came out on Fat, that's kind of where it resides. They're sort of in between. They're like a heavy Bad Religion. They're like a Bad Religion with like really heavy that sort of like metallic kind of guitar. And if you look at I think it's called Incognito or Daily Grind, which is the first EP on Fat that they had right before this. Again, it's still very much just like a Bad Religion imitation band, as if like Tony Sly was fronting a band that was basically trying to be Bad Religion. It's on this album where I'd say they broke away from that, where
Okay.
now they sound like their own band. Not to say they don't sound like No Use on those, but that band sounds like a derivative Bad Religion, a derivative skate punk band. This band this is when they're having their own defined sound coming out to be. And I think again, it's got so many of their big songs that would come on to define the band. You mentioned Justified Black Eye, right? Is that the one you mentioned?
Yeah.
Which is one of their big songs. Soulmate, which is probably
Yeah.
maybe their most, I mean, their biggest song
That's the one that I
technically.
heard. That's how I heard No Use for a Name was that song.
Mm-hmm. Straight from the Jacket, which is also one of their iconics. I mean, you could go down every one of these. There's not a one of these they didn't play fairly regularly in their set. There's not a one of these that isn't fairly beloved. So this album comes out again 1995. So it's right after that boom in 94 where
Right.
everything is happening, everything we're talking about. And this album comes out early that year. This album, you could say, was kind of technically like a late period 94 album because it comes out right at the beginning of the year and it was riding that wave. Now, that wave included what we were talking about, the famous story of the song Soulmate, which who knows how history turns out if that song would have stayed on MTV. Because as the story goes, uh, No Use for a Name shot a video for Soulmate. And if you've ever seen the video for Soulmate, it's totally a 90s style video.
Yeah.
It looks like it could be played at the X Games. Like they're snowboarding, they're doing the thing, there's the pretty girl, all of the things are in there. And it was doing pretty well in 120 minutes and was fairly well requested on MTV. However, MTV wanted NoFX videos, and Fat Mike did
Yep.
not want NoFX on MTV. He just did not want to participate in that at the time. So he said he was not going to give them any NoFX videos. Well, because Fat Records was the distributor, of the No Use for a Name stuff. MTV's basically their ultimatum with them is we're going to pull the No Use for a Name video if you don't give us a NoFX video. And Fat Mike stuck to his guns, and so they pulled the Soulmate video from the MTV2 rotation. Which again, it's a really interesting timing because this is right at the tail end of Smash and all that stuff is still, you're still basically in 94 when this is released. So this could have really, I don't know how big this album could have got, but to say it was not limited by that, I think is absolutely, a true statement. Because who knows how big this album would get, or what happens next for the band? Maybe if they just catch on with this album and a ton of people catch their eye. And Tony or the band has never really commented other than reiterating the story. I would love to know how they felt. Did they support Mike in his decision? Were they kind of mad about it? I would love to get some truth serum from everyone on that story.
100% speculating here,
Mhm.
but if it were me, I feel like when it happened, they were probably like, "Yeah, we get it, punk rock, da 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 da." And then if you fast forward like 3 or 4 years, they're like, "What the fuck were we thinking, man? We should have talked him into getting us on that, getting No Effects on MTV." Because I think that at least one member of that band had to be like, "Dude, fuck that, man. We need to get airplay. We gotta. This is a job for us. It's a career. It's not just a hobby." And like, there's this weird line that punk rockers walk about like money being involved in stuff.
Mm.
If you don't think that money is a priority within punk rock, you aren't paying attention. Now, there are certain branches of punk rock, specifically like the anarcho stuff and the crust stuff, where it's really not what they're trying to do, right? They have a message and their stuff is like message only. But most bands, they want to create artwork and they want to be able to do that full time. That requires money. It's not a bad thing to get a paycheck. It's a bad thing to be a douche to get a paycheck. This is like when people say that Green Day sold out. No, they didn't. Green Day's always been Green Day. Like, that's not an example of selling out. I would say that MGK would be a guy that I would say is a sellout. He changed his sound in order to get popular and make money. Now, even then, I don't know that I would be selling out either because he liked that music before he started making it. So, like, selling out is a very weird thing. I don't know that it's like, if you're a punk rock dude and you have this certain ethos, and then you go and change that so that you can make money, I think that's selling out. But like, yeah, I think that these guys, my point is that they deserved more than they got, and I feel like this album would have been pretty fucking big if they had a little more ability to stay on the platform. I mean, that's like it'd be like if you had, man, I hate to even bring this dude's name up, but like, hey man, Finn McKitty's gonna play your music video on his channel 2 or 3 times. But in order to do that, he wants you to wear one of his shirts like on stage a couple times, and you're like, no, man, I don't really support his channel. And it's like, yeah, but dude, he's gonna play one of our videos, and you're like, I'm not gonna. It's not quite the same thing, but it's you get all this exposure, and you're just stubborn, and you don't want to do it. And I see it, I get it, I understand it, but fuck, I bet they wish they had done things a little different. Mike probably wishes it just for the sake of his friends.
Yeah, because that's a hard thing to do to someone else. Like, it's one thing if it's your band, like we are making that decision, but it's kind of
Right.
being made.
Do you think he
Um,
talked to the band about it at all, or did he just do it? I
oh,
wonder.
I would assume like Tony was one of his best friends, so I would
Yeah.
assume, and I don't know how close they were. This is more at the start of their relationship, but I don't know how
Right.
close they were back then. But I would assume that the guys kind of understood it. But again, and this is the guys when they're trying to make it though too. So that's a whole different
That's what
type.
I'm
Like,
saying. It's a weird
the guys are starving,
situation.
and like, and not just them in particular, but like it's guys in a band trying to make it. I mean, they're all starving at that point. So it's
Right.
it's that's got to be a
And
hard thing to swallow. I mean, I guess on the back end, what they have to be thankful for is that at least they were at an independent that was sustainable, that they were going to
right.
get a career off of. That's where they are fortunate that their career just didn't die, I guess, from
You
that. 'Cause that
also
could have
have to
happened
think.
too.
You got to think, man. You know what you're signing up for when you hang out with that guy, with Fat Mike. Like, you
Mhm.
know what kind of shit he's all about. Like, I've never understood the no effects or posers talk shit. I've never got that. Never understood it. They're 100% self built. They've done everything themselves. Like, I don't like everything that they've done. I don't even like all their music, but I don't get it, man. It'd be like if my label blew up and then you called me a poser. Like, why? Because my label got kind of big. Like, what are we talking about? I did it all from my house. Like, what? So, I just don't understand why people have said the things they said about that band. But yeah, I do think that No Effects. I I don't know that I could do that to somebody that I cared
Mhm.
about. Is my point. I don't care if punk rock is on the line or not. Like, I just don't think. Unless I would have to get like your blessing, and then I'd have to be able to trust that you're not going to resent me later. And that's a lot, man. That's asking a lot.
Yeah, because again, we talk about, well, at least he was at a steady label. That's easy to say in hindsight. That like
Right. That's what
we
I'm
know
saying. Like this.
we know that
That's
now. In 1994, you know what I mean? Like the No Effects albums weren't even on that label. So like again the Propaganda and the Lagwagon albums are the biggest albums that
right,
it had at that point.
man. The propaganda thing bothers me because I don't like that band.
Oh, really?
I do not like Propaganda, man. I actively dislike that band. Like, I don't know what it is. You know what I think it might be though? I think it might not even be the band. I think it might be their fans, if I'm honest,
Mm,
because they're like diehard fans are really really frustrating. And I don't like
very sanctimonious. Very.
Yeah, it is what it is. I need to give them another listen, man. They got that
Um,
one song, "Back to the Motor League." It's a really good song. So based on that opinion of mine, I'll go back and listen to some other music and maybe form a different opinion. I should. But
I,
let's talk a little bit more about this record, man.
yeah, I want to point out something that's very interesting is because you talk about so maybe Top Secret, No Use for a Name did get signed after this because they did switch up their lyrical content quite a bit after this album, but you wouldn't really know it based on the tone because basically what happens if you look at it, there's this real like popification of them that kind of starts on this album that by the time I think they almost like perfected it by the time they got to Hard Rock Bottom, where that's a straight up a
Okay.
pop punk album.
Yeah.
You can argue, and then after that, they're almost like they're into almost emo and that kind of
They
stuff
have a
after that.
very
Yeah,
fluid sound. Their sound changes quite a bit all through their
that's
whole
why I
career.
wonder, like, had they have made it, they might have been thought of as a completely different band that we talk about. Oh, remember when they were a punk band because they had such kind of like
They might have done the Blink thing where they had that self-titled record that I don't personally like very much, but people call it perfect. They might have done something like that 2 albums sooner in their career where they went super pop punk, super emo, super radio friendly rock, which is whatever, man. Do as you want. It's your band. I'm not gonna judge anybody for it. But I do find it interesting that you said that with this album, they broke into their own sound because when I listen to this, I don't
Mhm.
hear a band that sounds unique at all. I hear another band that sounds like no Effects, Bad Religion, Pennywise, uh, you know, but I also wasn't a fan of theirs in the 90s. So I'm listening to this through a
Almost
2024,
yeah.
2025 lens. So if anybody, before you get mad at me, just understand that back in the 90s, I didn't listen to this music. I wasn't a Fat Records guy back then. I listened to No Effects a little bit, but I was an Epitaph guy. They had the bands I liked better. To me, all the Fat Record stuff sounded identical, which is stupid because, again, in hindsight, there's little differences in all of them.
And so in terms of and all those early fat bands kind of had like a little bit different identity to them. And I think like Tony was like the music nerd of the guys they knew. Like he was the guitar. Now he's not known for playing like these great like solos or riffs, but he's just like a very competent guitar player. Knew music
Yeah.
theory real well. Fat Mike talks about like that's how he learned about like harmonies and stuff like that was just from like Tony kind of
That's pretty cool.
explaining it to him. And so when you look at this album again, the point I was kind of making earlier, I think it's because he actually got married like a few years
Oh,
after this
word?
album. And so a lot of those songs become about like relationships and bad relationships. There are a lot of relational, and he becomes a father. And so there's a lot of those kind of songs. This album, though, it sticks out lyrically. It's still kind of in the grind. Like these songs are still pretty much about dark subject matter and not a lot of
Right.
like relational songs. Everyone, Justify Back Eye, Cat, even the song Soulmate, which has a title that sounds like a relational song. The sound of it has one of those like Tony Hawk kind of cool chick songs. The video looks like he's hitting on this chick. And if you actually listen to the lyrics, it could be about it's not even really related to it. So, and if you look at it, there's not really a lot of songs like that. And I think that's part of what when you talk about what people liked about Tony, people loved the his lyrics. People liked the stories that he kind of told
Yes.
within his song. And they're not like the most dynamic things. He just tells stories in a good way. Like he's a
Yeah,
good
they're relatable.
storyteller. Yeah. And I think that and that's why I think there's a certain sort of, even though they weren't a huge band, there's a certain wide appeal that anyone can kind of get into a band like No Use for a Name. There's songs on this album, like no matter what you've been through in life, you can kind of relate to all of this stuff. And like you said, the way he tells the stories, it's pretty good. You know, I have just about everything they have on vinyl. And one of my favorite things to do with his is I don't have it here, but go around with the lyric sheet on it. His is one
Right.
of my favorites too. And again, it's not the deepest lyrics, but part of being a good lyricist too is being able to fit them into your songs well too, and
Right.
being able to make them with that. And I think this album in particular, he did it really well
Well,
with accenting those things.
if you like Bad Religion, but you don't like all the complicated lyrics, this is a great substitute for that. And I
Mhm.
don't mean that in any disrespectful way. I'm very much saying that like with respect, and I think that's a positive thing. Uh, uh, Tony Sly, man, that guy's one of the most revered punk rock frontmen that I can come up with of our era. He
Mhm.
was one of the big losses. Like, you know how people start passing away and they're in their era? Like you had like Sid Vicious died in the 70s and 8, or was it late 70s? I think
The late
79. I
'70s,
can't.
yeah.
So like that was like the 70s guy. They're like, oh dude, fucking Sid's gone. Tony Sly was like one of those guys for us where he's like, you know, I probably barely even knew this band. And then when he left and the left, excuse me, when he passed away, I'm trying to be respectful, but like when he
Mhm.
passed away, I listened to this band 10x that as much. Like I started digging through their discography a little bit, and I was never, like I said, you know my history with this band. I'm
Mhm.
not a huge fan, but like that affected a lot of my friends because all my friends have been fans of this band forever. I was the outcast, dude. I was the guy that didn't like all the stuff all my friends liked. I just liked what I liked, and I did my thing. But I knew of this band, and I knew when that happened, it was
Yeah, I think people felt like they knew Tony, like
right,
through his lyrics and through and he was like strange about it. It's like he was the most normal guy seemingly, and which he was. So it's like the guy that has the rock and roll tragedy is actually the family man. Like, and
right,
that sucks. You know what I mean?
right.
There's something about the fact that he has this like emotional ballad to his daughter that like he's never gonna see again. Like that's
Oh, I can't
horrible
even
to
talk about that stuff. I'll start crying.
like it's bothersome. And then but I think it's almost and like look, it's sad when anyone passes away, right? And we could have a bunch of like crass, horrible music, and because we knew each other, it would be very sad to relive that. But I think there's a little bit different when like a poet passes away, so to speak, and
Right,
that you feel like you have that kind of connection to it, especially within this scene. Like there's a lot of good lyricists within the fat record scene, within punk rock, but like
right.
very few are quite this person. I love Jim Lindbergh, but like I want to like fight the system with him, or I want to like learn about things through Bad Religion. Whereas like Tony Sly is kind of like my big brother lyrically, and the lyrics sort of like bear that out, and it's a huge loss because think about like now when he could just be a legacy guy, when we could just
Right.
be tours at the punk rock museum or
Oh, exactly what I mean.
it's
Well,
terrible.
I mean, if you want to talk about the impact of Tony Sly, go to the punk rock museum. Right when you walk in the first room, there's a giant, like 4 foot by 3 foot, beautiful photograph of him. It's the one. It's the black and white one. It's really
Mhm.
famous. But Mike has that thing on an incredibly expensive frame on the wall. Like right when you walk in, that's the whole wall. It's the Tony Sly wall. Like that is impact, and I think that he is relatable on a completely different level than a lot of these guys. You get let's use Blink 182 as an example because they're the
Mhm.
guys that I think that had things broke a little different for No Use for a Name. They would have ended up being of maybe not that same level, but that's the people we're talking about at that
Mhm.
point. How the how are we relating to Blink 182 after Dude Ranch? Maybe after Enema of the State. Like it's just jokey stuff. Like that's how we relate to them. We kind of
Mhm.
always see them as these guys that are never really serious. Dude, when you're having a bad day at work, do you listen to No Use for a Name or Blink 182? You listen to No Use for a Name. That's the songs you have. It's relatable. It's like I don't know what I'm trying to say, man. It's like they're the most realistic lyrics, and this guy was an incredible. He was good at taking uh, a circumstance, situation, and being like, "Yeah, I've been there," or "Yeah, we're going through that together," and you can just listen to it, and it'll help you. It's therapeutic, man. It'll get you through your situations, and I don't know, man. I something I wrote down that I'll say right. I'll just say it right now
Mhm.
because it does make sense. I put down Justified Black Eye. Okay, I'll put Tony Sly is one of the most revered frontmen in punk rock, especially in the '90s. Was he this popular when he was still alive? And I don't know. It's a question I want to get back to in a second. And then right below that, I put Justified, Black Eye, Soulmate, and Redemption Song were the only three songs that I had liked on this album the last time we talked about it. But I've come to like this record quite a bit more since then. And then I put that I started liking. There's like 60% of the album now, like in my list. It's because the songs are relatable, and once you get past like I don't know the initial do I like the sound of this? Sometimes you don't know on a first listen or two or three. You have to give it some time. And I don't know. I feel like I'm just saying nothing, but it means a lot to me. Like what I'm trying to say means something to me. Like this guy's lyrics are incredibly relatable, and yeah, I just think that he was like you say, he was a poet, man. Was he going to be the most eloquent? I don't think so. But I don't think that eloquent matters much, dude. Like, can your
Well,
everyday guy listen to this and go, "Yep, I get it, man."
like with all that said, he's still the badass rock and roller. So, he's still gonna
Well,
package it
100%. So, okay,
that way. Shoot.
I do want to ask,
Mhm.
were they this popular when he was alive? Were they? Because
So,
I feel like that happens when artists pass, is that they get like a
I would say
big boost of
he
popularity.
himself is more of a revered figure now because of his passing, like individually. No
Okay.
Use for a Name was a pretty big band, but they didn't really have that sort of level of respect. I think that they do now. So I don't think
Okay.
they like, even on my stream. I've talked about it when people be like, and even when I was a kid, like they were the third or fourth like Fat Records band for me. And that's just kind of like they were always on the compilations. They were always there. So they were at that level of like, I want to say, like a really like a not the top of an epitaph band, but like one that maybe like a Millencolin. Think of like a Millencolin,
Okay.
one of those bands, or maybe like Alkaline Trio before the Vagrant years, maybe right
Well,
around there. So
Mill and Colin makes sense. I can see that they're on that same, like
yeah,
they're like bigger than like 10-foot pole, but they're not bigger than Mill and Colin or
yeah, but
Lagwagon, or I
like
guess
again, like
yeah, Lagwagon.
big enough to be in like a Tony Hawk kind of video game, that level
Right,
of band.
right, right, right.
Right. So I think they were on the first
Warp
Warp
Tour
Tour,
main
like
stage, but at like 4 o'clock, not 8:30.
yeah, yeah. So again, if they are touring, like, so I saw them, they were actually the second biggest club we have, but they're like, if they're on their headlining tour, maybe they're a slightly small tour, but they will also tour with the bigger bands. If you look at
Right.
like bands like this, they took out a lot of the bands that made it big later. They were like a headlining band, and a band like them, they said headlining actually on smaller tours for a while. It's hard to say because the whole scene was bigger back then. You know what I mean? So they were bigger, but I think his sort of the reverence for him, I think, has grown over the years. Plus, like his late career work, even though it's not as good of No Use for a Name stuff, I think it's really good songwriting stuff by him. So that also expanded it out just a little bit more. And then, unlike all these other bands, when someone passes away, unfortunately, there's like a finite amount of music. So I think it's a little bit easier to really go through all of it. Where it's like bands like Lagwagon and NoFX, they've been bands for so long. Like there's so many albums and stuff to
Right.
consume, and so many ebbs and flows.
Yeah. He did the acoustic stuff, right?
Yeah,
25.
yeah. And that's actually he has three, I think, total acoustic albums. The first
Oh,
few were
really?
just split albums he did with Joey Cape
That's right.
of Lagwagon, and
Of
the last
Lagwagon.
one was like originals. In fact, when he passed away, he was on tour with Joey, which those tours always seem to do
He passed away on tour.
what he so I've been confused about this a few times. I went back to the NoFX book a couple weeks ago because someone actually asked me about this, but so he was on tour that summer, him and this really small, like almost like a coffee shop, it's an acoustic tour, two guys
Yeah.
on an acoustic. It did fairly well, but it's this real small tour like that. So I believe he went home, but his family wasn't home that night. He passed away. I was always under the impression he passed away in the hotel room, but I was reading the NoFX book like 2 weeks ago, and it said actually he flew home like that night as he wasn't feeling good, and it was later that night or something to that effect. In effect, it's always been like the last thing he did was play that show that night and kind of
Man.
went home. That's always been the story. Like, so, and that's why in the song Linoleum, as No Effect says, it was the last song Tony ever played, and it's up on YouTube, the acoustic rendition of Linoleum that him and Joey Cape did together, which the emotions of that song, putting it together, you put all that. I mean, it's a heavy watch on
Wait,
YouTube.
on his last show, they did a acoustic cover of Linoleum.
The last song he ever
Holy
did, him and
shit!
Joey, so him and Joey Cape together did an acoustic version of Linoleum. The last show. It's there on YouTube. The two of them are just standing there. It's in a little tiny club. There's beer on the desk right there, and they're doing that song. So like he said, the last song Tony ever played.
You know what I like about doing this stuff with you, man? Well, there's a
What's that?
lot of things that I like about this, man. It's hella fun. I like that I am the kind of person that is very easy to convince to try something. So like I may not like it, but I'm trying it. It's pretty easy, man. I'll try just about anything.
Mhm.
But I feel like I how do I say this, man? I feel like I grow pretty consistently over the past 2 years. I like so much music that I used to not like much, and I didn't actively dislike it all. Some of
Mhm.
it I did, like The Clash I actively disliked for a long time. But, like, bands like No Use for a Name, I didn't dislike it necessarily. I don't like Strung Out, like, I dislike Strung Out. But,
Mhm.
like, No Use for a Name was one of those bands where, like, "Yeah, you like No Use for a Name?" I'm like, "Yeah, they're alright, they're pretty good." "What's your favorite album?" I'm like, "I don't know them that well." I didn't have a favorite album. Now I've got 2 records that I really, really like by these guys. I like this one quite a bit. That blue one, I can't remember the name of it. So the like
More betterness.
More Betterness, yeah.
Mhm.
That one I like quite a bit, and I feel like Making Friends has some songs on it that I really like too. But 2 years ago, I wouldn't have even said that. I wouldn't have known the album titles, I don't think.
Mhm.
I don't know, man. I like that I'm able to go back and just change my opinions on this stuff, because I mean, this dude was really important to my scene, like the shit that I love. So there's a certain amount of respect that's just due. Like I don't know, it's just cool. I just wanted to observe the fact that I'm willing to go and listen to this stuff, and I, like when you said that about them playing that cover of Linoleum, like probably excuse me, Lagwagon's a pretty decent band. I like them more than I like RKL.
Mm.
But they've also never been like my favorite band, but I want to go check that out. So I don't know, man. That's fucking cool.
Yeah, and
Or-
it's I think that's kind of what a lot of what we do is like with a band like No Use for Name. It's kind of up to us to sort of keep their memory alive because it's not,
right.
who else is going to tell a history of a kind of an undergroundish band like that other than us,
These guys
Yeah.
over here at the Punk Rock Review, folks. This is what we do. Okay, so we talked about how Green Day's Nimrod was
Mhm.
maybe not their best album. I put it up there as probably their best, but it's subjective. It's a great record regardless. How do you feel about this record? Where does this one fall in their catalog to you?
So I've always had it as second to third, but I think
Okay.
that's more personal preference. I think this may be their best album. Because just based on also thinking about what I go back to, like, so my favorite collections of songs are on More Betterness. I think the best songs are on that album. It's
That may
this
be
is
why I like it so much, because you like
I
it. I know that.
I think this one's almost a funner album though. Like it's better in and out because those songs are just a little more melancholy on this album. And when you look at sort of the ebbs and flows in this one, I think in terms of density of songs, it's right up there with that one. Making Friends, I think, has some big songs that are like better than some of these songs, but some of the lower end songs I think are a little bit of filler. And Hard Rock Bottom is a very good album, but I think as a whole, it's a very good album that's right here. So I say all that to say it's probably this album. This album's not necessarily my favorite, but I think objectively, I think it's this one just because like when I'm looking at those songs, like that's their set. Like those are the No Use for It. Just
Right.
My Black Eyes, 51 Days, Fatal Flu. Those are the No Use songs. This is as it's kind of like their Pumpkin Drublick. Like I don't know if that puts it on another frame, but it is the No Use for a Name album. I guess that's what I'll say. If they're best, they're worst, it is the album.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know if I even have enough knowledge to be able to say where I think this belongs in their catalog, other than I like it. It's probably my favorite one of theirs, um, with More Betterness being a second. And then I think Making Friends has enough songs that I like, if I remember correctly, to say that I also enjoy that record. And I would say that anything that they've put out, I probably like something off of it.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think fans of your channel, this is the record to check out though. Like if you want to check out No Use for a Name, I think
I
Leche
would
is
agree with that.
probably the best one to check out. It has and
Yeah.
it has like you get a song like Soulmate, which will kind of show you the popular directions they were, and then you have like a song like Straight from the Jacket that just has like that sort of full feel that they can have. It has their full range. Plus, it has my vinyl doesn't have the cover medley, but on streaming, it's got the cover medley. If you're into that kind of thing.
Well, it also has that song "Leave It Behind," that
Uh,
is basically just Bad Religion. So if you like Bad Religion, start with that song and go from there. I do think it's pretty cool, man, that even at this age I'm still finding stuff from like my era that I enjoy. So yeah, dude. No Use for a Name, very important band. Leche Con Carne, incredible record if you really take the time to listen to it, what they're saying. And honestly, I think Justify Black Eye as an opener is a fucking big dick move, man. That's super, super, super risky.
it was
Because
often their live opener too.
is it
They would
really? Well, I
yeah.
guess
And
I guess if you have like if you've already had the song out, that makes a little more sense. But like, dude, dropping a record with that as your opening song, because that is a very heavy song. Oh my goodness, dude.
I would say go and check out the Tony Slide tribute show that's up on YouTube. I love that concert. But for the whole show, it's a bunch of different singers singing No Use songs, except for the
Nice,
opener.
nice, nice.
The bass player Matt Riddle actually does the vocals to the song while he's playing the bass, finger bass. Which these songs are very very fast, and he does all the songs playing finger bass, which is just amazing. Yeah, it was after this album that the guy that was going to be in the Foo Fighters joined No Use for a Name, and then
That's
Matt from
crazy.
Face to Face joined him, and they really became like that super live unit. And Rory is still around. I think he's in a country band. It's one of those things. If you were in like No Use for a Name in the '90s, you got like a big time job like later on in life. It was kind of a star making place.
That's crazy. It's like kind of like Pat Smear is another one of those artists that you're
Mhm.
like, man, that guy's been around for a long time. He's done a lot of important shit.
I feel like he's like always in every band. I feel like Pat Smear's in Green Day. I know he's not, but because Green Day has those extra guitarists, I just in my head it's Pat Smear. In my head,
That
Pat
would
Smear
be,
plays with Green Day. I'm just gonna
dude, that
I'm
would
gonna
be
say that. I'm gonna
crazy.
start that as misinformation. Just let it run wild.
I support that, man. That's funny. So okay, yeah, man, dude, that was a fucking awesome talk.
Yeah.
So what have you been up to otherwise? You have any plans for the channel, or are you just doing your own thing on the other wrestling channel? Or no, not
It's been
wrestling. Wait, yeah,
yeah. I've been
wrestling.
mostly busy with wrestling stuff.
Yeah.
So that's been taking up most of my creative time. So I
Okay.
haven't.
I bought
But
a sorry.
no, I say I haven't had anything. It's been all just drilling down and mostly preparing for like this stuff.
I bought a you said we mentioned wrestling and I immediately thought of Lars because that's
Mhm.
what one would do in my position. I
Yes.
bought a Bombshell Rocks test press off of Lars.
Mm.
Once we hit 10K, I'm going to reach out and see if I can get him on the show. I just had Roger Mirrod on, and I had Brenna Red from The Last Gang, and I had Graham who sings for Homefront. Got a lot of good people coming on the show, man. I got some other people in March. Cat Bite's coming back on, which is a big deal to me. I love those guys. Uh, yeah, man, that's awesome, dude. Well, I don't know, man. A couple weeks we'll be sitting down talking about NoFX and MXPX, the X bands,
Mm.
the X games. Not the same thing at all, but I liked them both in the 1990s, in the 1900s, one would say.
Last
So, uh,
century.
every now and then I ramble a little too much, folks. My apologies. Thank you for hanging out. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. And, if you want to support further, Patreon link is in the description. My Bandcamp is in the description. We just put out 2 7-inch records. I have a third vinyl release that's the test presses are on their way to me right now. I have a fourth one that is working on by this summer, and then I have a fifth and a sixth by late summer, early fall. We are a full-on vinyl record label now, so it is really, really daunting to say that out loud because I know how much all this shit costs, and it is stressing me out. But thank you for your support. I love you guys. Hope you had a good time. We'll see you in the next Punk Rock Review podcast. Peace.